Most people try to lose visceral fat by eating less, and you hear it all the time, just cut the calories. And that works to an extent, but the data shows something that completely flips that approach. Caloric restriction in practical terms has a ceiling. And after a certain point, you just stop seeing much additional visceral fat loss, because as you lose weight, your body starts defending against any additional weight loss. It's an evolutionary survival mechanism. Your body sees fat loss as a threat, so it slows the system down. You burn fewer calories at rest, and you move less, even without realizing it. Your body temperature can drop, and your hunger and your food noise get louder. So starving yourself is not the answer here. When it comes to visceral fat, adding the right foods is just as important. Because to lose visceral fat, we actually need to add foods that target the specific signals that help create visceral fat in the first place. And when you combine the right foods with the right kind of exercise, the response becomes dose-dependent, which means the more of the right signals you send, the more visceral fat you lose, and you do it much faster. And that changes how you should approach this whole thing, because visceral fat is not just belly fat. It sits deep inside your abdomen. It wraps around your liver and your stomach and your pancreas and your other internal organs. And visceral fat is metabolically active, so it continuously pumps out inflammatory signals. And these signals disrupt your hormones, and they create this self-reinforcing loop that eventually leads to things like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and even dementia. So in this video, I want to walk you through the exact protocol, the specific foods that target visceral fat through 3 different biological mechanisms, and then we'll talk about the exercise piece that becomes the multiplier on top of all of that. And I'll show you how you can cut your visceral fat nearly in half in just 8 weeks. If you're new here, I'm Dr. Harold Bennett. I'm a double board certified physician, and on this channel, my mission is to give you the science and practical tools to live longer and feel better. And if you find this video helpful, please hit the subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. Standard disclaimer, even though I'm a physician, I'm not your physician. So please talk to your doctor before making any changes to your health regimen, as this video is educational only and not medical advice. So the reason this protocol works is that it targets the exact mechanisms that keep visceral fat locked in place, and there are 3 of them. The first one is inflammation. Visceral fat is not just sitting there storing energy, it's actually actively inflamed. The fat cells themselves release inflammatory molecules called cytokines. Things like TNF-alpha and interleukin-6. And this creates a feedback loop. The fat drives inflammation, and the inflammation makes the fat more resistant to being broken down. So visceral fat, in a sense, protects itself by staying inflamed. But when you bring that inflammation down, you actually break that cycle, and all that stored fat becomes much easier for your body to mobilize and burn. There are 2 levers I want to focus on here, because you need both to break the cycle that keeps visceral fat stuck in place. The first lever is omega-3s, and a good food to add here is walnuts. Walnuts are rich in polyunsaturated fats, especially alpha-linolenic acid or ALA, which is a plant-based omega-3 fat. And omega-3s directly calm down those inflammatory signals coming from visceral fat. Another strong source of omega-3s is fatty fish, things like salmon, sardines, or mackerel. Those are rich in EPA and DHA, and they also help with insulin sensitivity and fatty liver. The second lever is polyphenols. And walnuts actually help here too, because walnuts are not just rich in omega-3s, they also contain a lot of polyphenols. These compounds help in a different way. Polyphenols improve how fat is handled and burned, so your body shifts more toward burning energy instead of storing it. And there was an interesting randomized controlled trial where researchers compared 3 groups: a standard healthy diet group, a standard Mediterranean diet, and a greener, more polyphenol-rich Mediterranean diet. Both Mediterranean groups got a small handful of walnuts per day, about 28 grams or just a quarter of a cup. But the greener Mediterranean version also added green tea, a daily mankai shake, and less processed and red meat. When they measured visceral fat by MRI, the greener polyphenol-rich Mediterranean group lost almost double the visceral fat compared to the regular Mediterranean group. And this is already showing you why this goes beyond calories in and calories out. Both groups were eating the same number of calories, but the group that added more polyphenol-rich foods lost more than double the visceral fat. Same calories, very different results. Because the type of food changes is how your body processes and stores energy. Now for most people, mankai isn't easy to find. It's actually a marine plant, a type of duckweed. But in practical terms, we just want to push our nutrition in a more polyphenol-rich direction with things like leafy greens and berries. And just keep in mind that mankai is also a complete source of protein, so if we want to replicate this study, we still want to get adequate protein from somewhere else. If this is already making sense to you, go ahead and hit the like button. It helps this information reach more people who need it. Now the second mechanism that keeps visceral fat locked in place is insulin resistance. When your body becomes resistant to insulin, your cells stop responding to it efficiently. So your pancreas is forced to pump out more and more insulin to try to clear all that excess glucose in the blood. And chronically elevated insulin directly promotes fat storage, especially around your organs. This is why people with insulin resistance tend to disproportionately accumulate fat around the abdomen and around those internal organs, even when their total calorie intake hasn't changed. So anything that improves how your body responds to insulin is going to make it easier to clear visceral fat. And there are two really good foods to do this, but they do it in two very different pathways. The first one is broccoli sprouts, and this is probably the most underrated food on this list. Broccoli sprouts are packed with a compound called sulforaphane, a compound that activates a pathway called NRF2. And NRF2 is like your body's internal control center for inflammation and oxidative stress. When NRF2 turns on, it activates a whole network of genes that protect your mitochondria and reduce inflammation at the cellular level. And sulforaphane also tells the liver to slow down gluconeogenesis, which is when your liver produces new glucose on its own. So now you're getting better blood sugar control from two different directions all at once. Now why broccoli sprouts and not regular broccoli? Because broccoli sprouts have anywhere from 20 to 100 times more sulforaphane precursors than the mature vegetable. So just a small handful of sprouts can deliver more sulforaphane than an entire head of broccoli. Most people can get good benefits with about a half cup per day, ideally raw, mixed into a salad, or blended into a smoothie. And since sulforaphane clears your system pretty quickly, a little bit every day works much better than big amounts once a week. In terms of where to find them, some grocery stores carry broccoli sprouts in the produce section, usually near herbs and microgreens, but availability can be hit or miss depending on where you live. If you can't find them, they're actually very easy to grow at home. You just need a mason jar and some broccoli sprouting seeds, and you can grow them in about 5 days. There are lots of easy tutorials on YouTube, and it costs a fraction of what you'd pay at the store. Broccoli sprouts aren't the only food that moves the needle on insulin signaling. Other high-yield options include dark chocolate, but it has to be at least 85% cacao or higher, berries, and fermented foods like kimchi and sauerkraut. All of them have evidence behind them for improving insulin sensitivity, and they all work through different pathways. Now let's talk about the third mechanism. So we've talked about breaking the inflammation cycle and fixing insulin signaling, but your body also needs a signal to actually start burning stored fat. And this is where extra virgin olive oil comes in. The polyphenols in olive oil activate two specific pathways. The first is the AMP pathway, which is essentially your body's energy sensor. When AMP turns on, it tells your cells to start pulling from fat stores and burning them for fuel. The second pathway is called SIRT1. This one improves how efficiently your mitochondria operate, especially in your muscles. So not only does your body get the signal to burn fat, it actually gets better at doing it. And there was a study published in the European Journal of Nutrition that showed this exact pattern. It was a double-blind, randomized, controlled trial comparing extra virgin olive oil to soybean oil. Both groups ate the same number of calories with the same calorie deficit. The result? The olive oil group lost 80% more body fat, with just 25 milliliters per day, which is about 1.5 tablespoons. Same calories, same deficit, completely different outcomes, because olive oil was telling the body to burn more fat. That's the deeper point here. The quality of the calories can lead to very different outcomes, even when the calorie math looks identical. So that's the food piece of this protocol. Now, if you go a step further and add exercise, that's where your results start to compound, and this is how you can start losing visceral fat much quicker, in some cases in just weeks. There was a large meta-analysis of 84 studies that compared every major type of exercise to see which ones actually reduce visceral fat. And the ones that came out on top were exercises done at higher intensity, specifically vigorous intensity aerobic exercise and high intensity interval training. And there was a study published in Diabetes Care that showed just how powerful this can be. In their protocol, just 2 45-minute cycling sessions per week at moderate to vigorous intensity, plus 1 additional interval training session, 3 sessions per week total, reduced visceral fat by 48%. Almost half, and they did all of that in just 8 weeks. On top of that, the intervention group also lost 18% of their subcutaneous fat. Now, this was a small study, but the direction is consistent with the larger analyses. And there was something else fascinating in this study. The participants lost almost half of their visceral fat, but the scale stayed almost the same. And that's something I talk about with my patients all the time. We cannot live and die by the scale, because it's a poor metric of progress when it comes to visceral fat. If you're doing all the right things, but the number isn't moving, that doesn't mean it's not working. For most of these studies, they look at moderate to vigorous intensity, at least 40 to 60% of maximum heart rate reserve. A lot of smartwatches and fitness trackers can calculate this for you in real time. In terms of heart rate zones, moderate intensity is roughly zone 2 and vigorous intensity is around zone 3 or zone 4. But keep in mind, we can't always rely on heart rate alone, especially if you're on medications like beta blockers, which can lower your resting heart rate. And zone references aren't always standardized between manufacturers. The easiest way to track this, and this is what I personally do, is the talk test. You know you're in the moderate intensity zone if you can still talk comfortably in phrases or short sentences, but you're slightly winded. Another way to think about it, you can still talk, but you can't sing. A lot of that might sound intimidating, especially if exercise isn't already part of your routine. But moderate intensity does not mean sprinting. For many people, especially just starting out, this could be a brisk walk, walking uphill, or cycling at a steady pace. And in the studies that showed the best results, participants didn't start at full intensity on day 1. They ramped up gradually over several weeks to months. The goal is to work your way up, not jump straight to the top. That's how you injure yourself. And if you have a heart condition, definitely talk to your doctor first about what intensity level is right for you. All you need is 2 to 3 sessions per week, 45 minutes per session. And it really doesn't matter what type of exercise you choose, as long as you incorporate intensity. But maybe even more important than that is consistency. A slow 20-minute walk done every day is far better than an all-out 60-minute HIIT session done once a week. Here's the part that really changes this whole equation. A study published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine found that with exercise, the more you do, the more visceral fat you lose, in a dose-dependent manner. But with caloric restriction, they did not see the same response. There is a ceiling to how much caloric restriction helps. There is no ceiling to how much movement helps. So you absolutely do not need to starve yourself to lose visceral fat. Target the right foods, aim for a small calorie deficit, and if you want to speed up the process, pull the lever on aerobic exercise and intensity. I hope this was helpful. If you have questions, drop them in the comments below. I read through them and I'll do my best to answer. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a great time to do it. I put out new videos every week on the science of living longer and feeling better, and I'd love to have you as part of this community. Stay healthy, and I'll see you in the next one.